The 1970s. Across South America, a shadow is falling. One by one, democracies are crumbling, replaced by the iron fist of military dictatorships. In Paraguay, Brazil, Bolivia, Uruguay, Chile, and Argentina, a new kind of war is being waged. It's a war fought not on traditional battlefields, but in darkened basements, on quiet city streets, and across international borders. It's a war against an enemy the regimes call subversion. But this war has a terrifying new doctrine: transnational repression. The idea that a state's enemies are never safe, no matter where they run. In November 1975, the architects of this new war gathered in secret. At the Army War Academy in Santiago, Chile, the host was General Augusto Pinochet's notorious spy chief, Manuel Contreras. He invited intelligence officers from across the Southern Cone. Their goal was to formalize a pact to create a system of unprecedented cooperation. They would share intelligence, hunt down political opponents who had fled into exile, and eliminate them. They needed a name for their secret alliance, something that honored the host country. They called it Operation Condor. For decades, this was the official story. Operation Condor was a monstrous but self-contained regional phenomenon, a pact among brutal dictators to silence dissent. Their targets weren't just armed guerrillas. The definition of subversive was dangerously broad, including union leaders, priests, intellectuals, students, and journalists. The human cost was staggering. Estimates suggest that Condor and the dirty wars it was part of resulted in the imprisonment of over 400,000 people and the deaths or disappearances of as many as 60,000. It was a horrific chapter of South American history, seemingly written, directed, and executed solely by the regimes themselves. A problem for them, by them. That was the story. But it wasn't the whole story. The truth often lies buried, not in a grave, but in an archive. For years, the full story of Operation Condor was locked away, hidden under layers of classification. But thanks to the relentless work of researchers and organizations like the National Security Archive, thousands of pages of secret U.S. government documents have been declassified. These aren't second-hand accounts. They are the internal memos, cables, and intelligence reports of the CIA, the FBI, and the State Department. And they are the snitch in our story. A paper trail that leads directly back to Washington, D.C. The first domino falls on July 2, 1976. This is the first known declassified U.S. government document to mention the alliance by name. It's a CIA weekly summary, an internal intelligence briefing. The memo reports that 6 Southern Cone governments had met and agreed to coordinate intelligence operations. It even mentions a specific joint raid on a human rights office in Buenos Aires. This single page is a bombshell. It proves, without a doubt, that the United States had direct, real-time knowledge of the secret pact. They weren't just aware of repression, they were aware of the coordinated network. They had a name for it: Operation Condor. The existence of this memo changes everything. It shatters the official story of American ignorance. The U.S. intelligence community wasn't playing catch-up years later. They were tracking this network almost as it happened. Condor was formalized in late 1975. The CIA was reporting on it by name just over 6 months later. This proximity transforms the narrative. It's no longer a question of an intelligence failure, of not knowing. It becomes a question of policy. The central mystery is no longer if the United States knew. The real questions are, how much did they know? And what, if anything, did they decide to do about it? Exhibit A in our investigation comes from the U.S. ambassador to Uruguay, a man named Ernest Siracusa. In a cable sent to the State Department on July 20th, 1976, he reveals the foundational mindset of the American foreign policy establishment. He argues that since the United States had long urged these countries to increase their cooperation for security, the American reaction to their coordinated efforts should not be one of opprobrium. It's a stunning admission, The U.S. had pushed for this kind of anti-communist cooperation. Now that it was happening in its most brutal form, the official position was not outrage, but understanding. The methods might be abhorrent, but the goal was one the U.S. shared. But how high up did this knowledge go? An ambassador's opinion is one thing. To prove complicity, the paper trail has to lead to the top. It has to lead to the office of the Assistant Secretary of State for Inter-American Affairs, Harry Schlaudeman. And ultimately, it has to lead to his boss, the architect of American foreign policy, a man who prized stability over morality and who saw the world as a grand chessboard in a global struggle against communism. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. Exhibit B. On August 3, 1976, Harry Schlaudeman writes a 14-page memorandum directly for Secretary Kissinger. The subject, the Third World War and South America. The memo confirms the worst. It states in black and white that the Southern Cone governments have established Operation Condor to find and kill terrorists in their own countries and in Europe. This is the smoking gun for knowledge. It wasn't just intelligence sharing. It wasn't just surveillance. It was a cross-continental assassination program. And the Secretary of State of the United States was now officially briefed on it. The memo even warns that the regime's definition of terrorist was dangerously broad, including nonviolent dissent from the left and center-left. There was no ambiguity. Kissinger knew. Knowing is one thing, endorsing is another. To find evidence of that, we must go back in time slightly to before the Schlaudeman memo was even written. The date is June 10, 1976. The location, Santiago, Chile. Henry Kissinger is in town for a meeting of the Organization of American States. He arranges a private meeting with the Foreign Minister of Argentina's new military junta, Admiral Cesar Guzzetti. The junta had seized power less than 3 months earlier and was eager for Washington's approval. What was said in that room between the world's most powerful diplomat and the representative of a regime already engaged in a brutal, dirty war would remain a secret for decades. Exhibit C. The declassified memorandum of that conversation is the final, damning piece of the puzzle. In the meeting, Admiral Guzzetti tells Kissinger about their joint efforts with other Condor nations to combat the terrorist problem. He is testing the waters, seeking a signal from the superpower. Kissinger provides it. He doesn't issue a written order. He doesn't use crude language. He uses the careful, deniable words of a master of realpolitik. He tells Guzzetti, "If there are things that have to be done, you should do them quickly." He adds, "We want you to succeed. We do not want to harass you." This is not a warning. It is not a condemnation. It is a green light. A quiet, private word of encouragement from the most powerful diplomat on earth, giving a murderous regime the political cover it craved. The paper trail is complete, and it is undeniable. It begins with a CIA intelligence memo proving they knew the name and the nature of the alliance. It continues with an ambassador's cable, proving the policy was to tolerate the methods as a means to an end. It leads to a direct briefing for the Secretary of State, proving he knew it was an assassination program. And it ends in a private meeting with that same Secretary of State giving a quiet word of encouragement. Each document is a single brick. Together, they build a wall of evidence. This was not an intelligence failure. It was not a case of the United States being out of the loop. It was a calculated policy choice, born from the brutal logic of the Cold War. In the global struggle against international Marxism, what the generals and some in Washington called the Third World War, these right-wing dictatorships were seen as vital, if unsavory, allies. The declassified record demonstrates that to achieve its geopolitical objectives, the United States government was willing to overlook and even quietly endorse the most heinous crimes of its partners. Stability at any cost was the prime directive. The declassified files force us to rewrite history. Operation Condor can no longer be seen as a purely regional atrocity. It was a campaign of state-sponsored terror that operated within a geopolitical environment shaped and quietly sanctioned by a global superpower. The lack of a formal written order from Washington to liquidate enemies was not proof of innocence. It was the very essence of the policy, an architecture of plausible deniability, where a quiet conversation could convey what a signed directive never would. The public policy was to condemn human rights abuses. The private policy revealed in these documents was to give a green light to terror. History is not always what is written in the approved textbooks. Sometimes the real story is hidden away in classified files, waiting for a snitch. The declassified history of Operation Condor doesn't just change our understanding of a dark chapter of the past. It serves as a permanent warning. It reveals how the machinery of power can operate in the shadows and reminds us that the line between a passive observer and an active accomplice can be as thin and as deniable as a single secret conversation.